The wind howled through the empty streets of Manhattan as Ethan James stepped out of his sleek black sedan into the cold evening air. The city was alive with lights, bustling with life, yet to him it felt strangely muted. He was late again, nothing new. His job as a CEO demanded late nights and endless meetings, and for months he had let work consume him. As he walked through the lobby of their luxury apartment building, the usual hum of the city faded into the background. He didn't notice the dark shadows lurking in the corners of the room or the soft murmurs of other residents. His mind was elsewhere, on the unexpected tightness in his chest, the unsettling feeling that something was wrong. When he stepped off the elevator and into their penthouse, the door swung open before he could even reach for the handle. Julia, his wife of 7 years, stood there looking more beautiful than ever, but something was different. Her usual warm smile didn't reach her eyes. She was dressed up, despite it being a Wednesday night, and the perfume she wore was unfamiliar, heavier than usual. "Hey, you're home late again," she said, her voice a little too casual. "I was just about to leave, actually." Finn hesitated. There was something off about her tone, sharp, distant. Julia had never been this cold with him before. He forced a smile and leaned in to kiss her cheek, but she pulled back just enough to avoid it. "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice suddenly tight. Julia hesitated, if only for a second, before answering. "Just out for a bit. Don't worry about it." But Ethan was worried. The feeling in his gut wouldn't leave him. Had he been so consumed with work that he had missed the subtle shifts in their relationship? Now, standing here, he could feel it. The space between them wasn't just physical. It was something deeper, colder. "I'll be back soon," she said, brushing past him to grab her coat. Ethan stood frozen, watching her every move. He knew that coat. She had worn it for dinners, nights out with friends, but never for just stepping out. His heart pounded as an unsettling thought crept into his mind. Was she seeing someone else? Julia. Her name left his lips barely above a whisper, tight with something he couldn't quite name. She paused, glancing over her shoulder. For a brief moment, something flashed in her eyes, guilt perhaps? Or was it something darker? She masked it quickly with a smile, but it was too late. Ethan already knew. He didn't need proof. He didn't need a confession. He just knew. "I'll be back," she repeated, her voice too rehearsed. Then she was gone. The door clicked shut behind her with a finality that made his chest tighten. Ethan stood there, staring at the empty space where she had just been. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of a truth he wasn't ready to face. Something had changed, and it was too late to pretend otherwise. The woman he thought he knew, the woman he had trusted, was slipping away, slipping into a lie he wasn't sure he could escape from. He walked to the window, gazing out at the shimmering city lights below. But his mind wasn't on Manhattan. It was on Julia. His heart twisted, a mixture of suspicion and fear tightening in his chest. He had always trusted her. But tonight, the coldness in her eyes, the distance, felt like a crack in a once perfect glass. First, it had been small things. Julia becoming more withdrawn, spending hours on the phone, laughing a little too loudly at something only she could hear. Finn had brushed it off as stress, a phase, something temporary. But deep down, a quiet voice had been growing. A voice whispering that something was slipping through his fingers. He closed his eyes and let his mind drift back to when they first met. He had been just another ambitious young man working his way up in a tech startup. Julia had been a whirlwind, a force of nature with her dazzling smile and infectious energy. They had met at a gallery opening, her laughter filling the room like music. Back then, she had been his everything. So when had she become a stranger? And more importantly, was this the beginning of the end? She was everything he hadn't known he wanted, unpredictable, exciting, and full of life. For the first time, he felt like he was truly living in the moment, not just chasing the next success. They had been inseparable, sharing dreams of the future, building a life together. Julia had been his anchor, his source of stability. For years, their love had felt unbreakable. On the surface, their relationship seemed flawless. Ethan buried himself in work, and Julia was always by his side, supporting him. But somewhere along the way, he had lost sight of the little moments that truly mattered. Julia had always been the center of attention, effortlessly charming everyone she met at parties. He had never thought twice about it. He trusted her completely. He thought he knew her. Now, standing alone in their apartment, he wasn't so sure anymore. Something in her had changed, and he couldn't pinpoint when it had happened. The night she left, he hadn't even asked where she was going. It hadn't seemed to matter at the time. She had always had her own life outside of him, and he had accepted that. But tonight felt different. The distance between them was palpable, suffocating. It was as if she was slipping away before his very eyes. That nagging feeling in his gut wouldn't let him rest. He had to know what was happening. He had to see for himself. He wasn't just going to sit in the dark, waiting for answers. He was going to find the truth, no matter where it led. The next few days passed in a blur of tension. Julia was home less and less. Her excuses grew thinner. Late nights at the office turned into mysterious girls' nights out with friends he had never heard of. But still, she would flash him that smile, the one that had always made his heart skip a beat, and he would let it slide. Not anymore. Not when the trust that once felt unshakable was crumbling before him. He couldn't ignore it any longer. He hired a private investigator, a quiet, methodical man named Marcus, known for getting results. Ethan needed discretion, and Marcus was the best. He needed someone to dig, to uncover whatever Julia was hiding. He needed the truth, even if it destroyed him. As the days passed, Ethan's anxiety grew. He couldn't focus on work. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was slipping just out of reach. Then came the report. The investigator had followed Julia on one of her nights out. Ethan read through the details, his hands trembling as the truth hit him like a sledgehammer. Julia had been meeting someone, a man he had never heard of. They had been seeing each other for weeks, sneaking around behind his back. There were photos. Julia laughing, her face glowing in a way he hadn't seen in months. The man she was with was older, confident, and far too comfortable in her presence. Whatever they shared, it wasn't just a casual fling. It was real. It was something she had chosen. Ethan's heart sank. His breath caught in his throat. The world he had believed was secure and predictable had shattered in an instant. He didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal or the realization that Julia had been so careful, so calculated. She had been lying to him. For the first time in years, Ethan felt the weight of his own choices. Had he missed the signs? Had he been so focused on his career, on building his empire, that he failed to see the cracks forming in his marriage? Had he trusted Julia when he should have been paying attention? With the truth staring him in the face, Ethan felt a mix of rage and heartbreak. But more than anything, he felt a deep, aching emptiness. The woman he had loved, the woman he had shared everything with, had betrayed him. And in that moment, he knew nothing would ever be the same again. He looked out the window, the city lights a blur beneath him. A part of him wanted to run, to confront Julia, to demand answers, to scream. But another part of him, the part that had been hurt so deeply, knew it was too late for that. The damage was done. The trust was gone. And with it, any chance of repairing what they had. Now, the only thing left to do was figure out what came next. Ethan sat in the dimly lit apartment, the weight of the private investigator's report heavy in his hands. His chest tightened with a sickening realization. Julia had been seeing someone else. Not just once. Not just a fleeting mistake. A full-fledged affair. And the betrayal wasn't just in her actions. It was in everything she had chosen to hide. Ethan could feel the years of trust slipping through his fingers like sand. The weight of betrayal pressed down on his chest, making it hard to breathe. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating. He tried to focus, tried to calm the racing thoughts in his mind, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw Julia, laughing, touching another man the way she used to touch him. The image made his stomach churn. How long had it been going on? How many nights had she snuck away, whispering secrets to someone else while he remained oblivious? Anger burned inside him, sharp and unforgiving, but it was nothing compared to the crushing heartbreak that followed. The realization that he had been living a lie made him feel hollow. Hours passed, but Ethan couldn't bring himself to leave the apartment. The silence around him was deafening, filled only with the distant hum of the city outside. Felt like a lifetime since Julia had left. He wanted to call her to demand answers, but a part of him knew it was too late. What could she possibly say to justify the gut-wrenching images in his mind? Nothing. Truth was undeniable. He didn't need her words to confirm it. Then came the phone call. His phone buzzed on the coffee table, the screen lighting up the dimly lit room. He didn't need to look to know who it was. Julia. Her name flashed on the screen, her smiling face staring back at him. But he couldn't bring himself to answer. What could he say? What could she say? The silence between them was now heavier than any words they could exchange. He let the call go to voicemail, each ring pulling him deeper into a pit of helplessness. As the night dragged on, Ethan's anger slowly transformed into something else, something colder, more calculated. He realized that confronting Julia now would only give her the upper hand. She had already manipulated the situation, controlled the narrative. If he let his emotions take over, he would lose. No, he wouldn't give her that satisfaction. Not when he was still reeling from the blow. Not when the truth had shattered him so completely. Instead, he decided to do something else. He needed to take back control. To reclaim something of his own in the mess she had created. His power. And to do that, he needed to disappear. The thought of walking away from everything, the life they had built, the home they had shared, sent a surge of determination through him. He had worked too hard for everything he had, too hard to let it all be taken from him so easily. Julia's affair wouldn't destroy him. If anything, it would be the catalyst for something new. By the time Julia returned later that evening, the decision had already been made. Ethan had spent the last few hours planning how to leave, how to strip away everything they had built together and take back what was his. He wasn't sure what he expected to feel when she walked through the door, but he knew one thing: this wasn't a reunion. Key turned in the lock, and the sound echoed through the empty apartment. Ethan didn't look up. He remained seated, his back to her, his mind bracing for the confrontation he wasn't sure he wanted. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor as she stepped inside. The air between them felt heavy, charged with all the unspoken words they had yet to say. She didn't greet him, not in the usual affectionate way. Instead, there was a strange hesitation in her movements. Ethan could feel it, the calm before a storm. Slowly, he stood and turned to face her. Julia's eyes met his, and for the briefest moment there was something there. Guilt? Unease? But she quickly masked it with a soft smile, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm back," she said, her voice too light, too rehearsed. Ethan didn't smile. He didn't even speak at first. He just looked at her, taking in the woman he had once loved, the woman who now felt like a stranger. His heart ached, but there was no going back. His decision had already been made. "I know," he said finally, his voice cold, detached. Julia paused, her eyes narrowing slightly as if trying to read him. The silence between them stretched, thick and oppressive. She glanced around the room, her gaze sweeping over the space, and then she frowned. "Where's all the stuff?" she asked. It didn't take her long to notice that something was different. The living room, once cozy, filled with photos and memories, was now bare. The shelves were empty, the walls stripped of the life they had built together. Ethan didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked toward the door and opened it, standing in the doorway as if inviting her to see for herself. Julia hesitated. A flicker of confusion crossed her face. "Ethan, what's going on?" she asked, her voice quivering slightly. But even then, she already knew. He stepped aside, watching as she walked through the doorway into the empty space that had once been their sanctuary. She stood there, unmoving as realization set in. The silence was deafening. He didn't need her words to confirm it. Then his phone buzzed. The bright screen lit up the dark room. He didn't need to look to know who it was. Julia. Her name flashed on the screen, her photo smiling back at him. But he couldn't bring himself to answer. What could he say? What could she say? The silence between them now carried the weight of everything unspoken. He let the call ring out, each unanswered tone dragging him further into a pit of helplessness. As the night stretched on, his anger cooled into something else, something colder, more calculated. He realized that confronting Julia, at least now, would only give her the upper hand. She had already manipulated the situation, controlled the narrative. No, he wouldn't confront her, not when he was still reeling, not when the pain still had the power to break him. Instead, he made a different decision. He had to take back control. The thought of walking away from everything, the life they built, the home they shared, sent a surge of determination through him. Ethan had worked too hard for what he had. Too hard to let it slip away because of her betrayal. He wouldn't let Julia's affair destroy him. By the time Julia returned that evening, his decision had already been made. He had spent hours planning how to disappear, how to take back what was his. When the sound of the key turning in the lock echoed through the apartment, Ethan didn't look up. He stayed in his chair, his back to her, bracing himself for the confrontation he no longer feared. Julia stepped inside, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. The air between them felt charged, thick with unsaid words. She didn't greet him like she used to, with warmth and laughter. Instead, there was hesitation. Something was different. Ethan could feel it. He stood slowly, turning to face her. Her eyes flickered with unease, but she masked it quickly, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm back," she said, her voice light, too rehearsed. Ethan didn't smile. He didn't speak right away. He only looked at her, taking in the woman he had once loved, the woman who was now a stranger. His heart ached, but there was no going back. He had already made his choice. "I know," he said finally, his voice cold, detached. Julia's smile faltered. She glanced around, her gaze narrowing as she took in the space around her. Something was off. "Where's all our stuff?" she asked, her voice uncertain. Ethan remained silent, watching as her eyes darted across the room. It didn't take long for her to realize what had changed. The living room, once filled with warmth and memories, was now stark and empty. The walls, once adorned with framed pictures of their life together, were bare. The shelves had been cleared. Julia's breath hitched. "Ethan, what's going on?" she whispered, her voice trembling. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked to the door and opened it, stepping aside as if inviting her to see for herself. She hesitated, confusion written all over her face. But as she stepped past him into the emptiness of their once shared sanctuary, realization dawned. She turned back to him, her face pale. "Where is everything?" she whispered. Ethan stepped forward, his presence filling the empty space between them. "It's gone," he said, his voice void of emotion. Julia's breath caught. Her wide eyes searched his face for some sign that this wasn't real, that this was some cruel joke. But there was nothing. Only cold certainty. You're leaving," she choked out. "I'm not leaving, Julia," he replied, his gaze unwavering. "I'm gone." Her body swayed slightly, as if the weight of his words had knocked the air from her lungs. "But why?" "Ethan, we can—" "No," he interrupted, his voice firm. "We can't." Julia's lips parted as if to protest, but no words came. "Everything we had, it's gone." Just like that. He had spent too many years believing in something that had turned out to be a lie. And now he had nothing left to give. Her hands trembled as she reached for him, but he stepped back. Ethan, please. I. No. The single word silenced her. For the first time, Julia looked truly afraid, not just of losing him but of the consequences of her own choices. Ethan took a deep breath, steadying himself. The anger was gone now, replaced by quiet resolve. He had already won. And with that, he walked out the door, leaving her behind. Leaving it all behind. 'Cause the truth was, he wasn't running away. He was finally free. Someone had been following her, capturing moments she thought were hidden. She closed her eyes, trying to block out the rising panic. She had already lost everything. What more was there to lose? The truth was out, and there was no escaping it. The city lights blurred around her as she walked deeper into the night. Every step pulled her further from the life she once knew. She didn't even know what she was hoping for, but she couldn't stop walking, couldn't stop thinking about the man she had lost. But as the night stretched on, Julia realized the hardest part wasn't losing him, it was losing herself in the process. The days dragged on in a haze of confusion and regret. Julia had become a shadow of the woman she once was, moving through life like a machine. Every thought was consumed by the emptiness Ethan had left behind. She tried to reach out, sent countless messages, left voicemail after voicemail. But there was never a reply. The emptiness in her heart mirrored the empty apartment they had once shared. What had once been their home now felt like a stranger's space, cold and unfamiliar. She was alone. And it was a loneliness that ate away at her from the inside out. Julia had never realized how much of her identity had been tied to Ethan. He had been her anchor, the steady presence in her chaotic world. And now, without him, she was adrift. The affair, what she once thought was a fleeting indulgence, had turned into a monster, suffocating her with its consequences. She had believed she could control it, keep her two worlds separate. She had been wrong. Now she spent her days pretending to care about work, about meetings and deadlines. But her mind was never really there. Every phone call, every email, every task felt like a distant echo of the life she had ruined. The hours stretched endlessly, and when she returned home at night, the silence was deafening. Ethan was gone. One evening, after yet another unanswered call, Julia found herself standing outside their apartment. She stared at the door that had once led to a life she thought would last forever. Felt like a barrier, keeping her from something she desperately wanted but could never have again. She pressed her trembling fingers against the cool wood, as if it were the only thing standing between her and the life she had shattered. She knew she couldn't keep living like this. She couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when her world was falling apart. She needed to fix this. But how? What could she possibly say to make it right? Truth was, there were no words. The damage was done. Ethan had made it clear, he wasn't coming back. With a heavy sigh, Julia pulled her phone from her purse. Her fingers hovered over the screen. She thought about calling him again, about begging for forgiveness. But the thought of hearing his voice, hearing the finality in it, was unbearable. She had already pushed him away. Already destroyed the trust they had built. No amount of pleading could undo the harm she had caused. As she stood there, lost in thought, her phone buzzed. Her heart skipped a beat. But it wasn't Ethan. It was a message from the investigator. Her stomach tightened. Her hands trembled as she opened it. "I have information. I think you should see it. Let me know when you're available." Her mind raced. What now? Was he still watching her? Had he found something new? The affair was already exposed. What else was there to uncover? But the nagging feeling in her gut told her she needed to meet him. She needed closure. Whatever he had found, she had to see it. Later that evening, Julia made her way to the meeting spot, a small, nondescript cafe in the heart of the city. The kind of place where people went to disappear. Her pulse quickened as she stepped inside. In the far corner, the investigator was already waiting. His face was shadowed beneath the brim of his hat. Julia took a deep breath and walked toward him, knowing that whatever he was about to tell her could change everything. He looked up as she approached, his expression unreadable. He didn't need to say anything. His presence alone was a reminder of how much she had lost. Julia sat down across from him, her hands trembling as she folded them on the table. "I know why you're here," he said, his voice low and steady. "But I have to tell you, what I found isn't pretty." She didn't respond. She just nodded, too exhausted to speak, too drained to hope for anything that might offer solace. She needed the truth, no matter how much it tore at her. The investigator slid a folder across the table. Julia reached for it, her fingers brushing against the paper as she pulled it closer. Slowly, she opened it and began scanning the contents. Inside were photos, more than she had expected. Images of her and the other man, taken over the past few weeks. They were in various places, laughing together, touching in ways she had refused to fully acknowledge. Each image was like a dagger to her heart, forcing her to face the betrayal she had tried to bury. But there was one more photo. This one wasn't of her. It was Ethan. Picture was taken from a distance, his expression unreadable. But in his hand was something, a letter. Julia's heart skipped a beat as she recognized the handwriting on the envelope. Her own. The investigator leaned forward. "He knew. He found out before I ever did the work for you. And the letter, well, it's his way of saying goodbye. He made sure you'd never forget what you did." Julia's breath caught in her throat. Ethan had known. Long before she had a chance to try to fix anything, he had already made his decision. The letter wasn't just a farewell. It was the final blow, the definitive end to everything they had been. Her chest tightened. Her vision blurred. The weight of the truth crashed down on her all at once. Ethan was truly gone. The last shred of hope she had been clinging to had just been ripped away, leaving her with nothing but the ruins of a life she had destroyed. As the tears fell, Julia realized there was nothing left to fight for. All that remained was the emptiness she had created, and the long road ahead where she would have to live with the consequences of her choices.